Hi there, everybody. We are going to have a little conversation today with Patty Greer and Chris Burris about C60, and we're going to go for a little walk. So take it away, Patty.
Thank you. We're talking about C60 Evo, which is this insane molecule, won the Nobel Prize in the 90s, but all three of us take it every day for brain function and overall well-being. Um, Oh, Chris has his. We're probably going to do a shot in a minute because it just makes the shows go
Huh,
more swimmingly strong. But
okay.
Penny and I have a wonderful history when I was making movies in the UFO field, and winning a lot of these awards. They're called EBEs at the International UFO Congress. Things heavy.
Whoa.
But they're all around the house. You see one or two there. But I was making movies about crop circles because I had no idea how infiltrated the field was. I just thought, wow, this is really fun. And
Yeah.
it was all about filming crop circles and not about science, just about like wow factor. And then I thought I was done making movies after seven, and somebody introduced me to Penny Kelly, who it turns out is the only secret to the crop circle science that's left on Earth because William Levengood passed away the year before I met him. And that's a weird statement, but Penny can explain that I met William Levengood after he died. And Penny totally understood it because she teaches
Okay.
intuition courses. And so she had this wonderful relationship for the last 16 years, and they re engineered crop circle frequencies, which to me is one of the most important discoveries that I've ever heard about in my life, other than free energy, spaceships. I mean, wow. But crop circles were delivering 30 to 400% more food and biofuel per plant with almost twice the nutrition. And for this discovery, I delivered the information in my final film, Crop Circle Diaries, co-starring Penny Kelly, and we delivered the science. And I got a couple more of these EBEs, one for Best Film, and the biggest compliment was People's Choice at the International UFO Congress, which, when people say, oh, she's Stephen Greer's wife, it's like, no, I met Stephen in one crop circle in 2010, took the photo that a lot of people refer to, but no, I didn't get any free fame or fortune or glory. I went in more than 100 crop circles, and then I met Penny. So that's my big brag is I met Penny because she knew the secret. And the secret was this incredible machine re-engineered to deliver the frequencies in crop circles so that we can bring our food supply back. And the science was beautifully explained by Penny in my film, which delivered all kinds of deep state action on my physical body. I was attacked twice. They tried to kill me twice because I was delivering information that was going to help us progress as a species. And unfortunately, there's a lot of deep state actors in all the fields, but ufology was really taken over at the end of my filmmaking career. They made it end by harming my physical body with something that maybe I'll talk about by the end of the show. But I've been through it. And for that reason, I found ESS 60 from Chris's lab and started taking this every day. And for that reason, knock on wood, I'm still here. And my brain is probably stronger than it's ever been. And Penny and I are young chickens in our 70s
Oh,
and
yeah.
somehow staying young and feisty. But also, it's about brain power. And I really love your brain power. I think you're one of the smartest women I've ever known.
Oh,
And the
thank you.
fact that you take C60 Evo daily and that I get to
Yeah.
send you more because you run out says this
Hmm.
is good stuff because you know food, you know food science, and I'm going to turn it over to you because um, actually, probably Chris should take us on the tour so
Yeah.
it'll blow your mind when he talks about the science of manufacturing ESS 60 in his lab because it made me just about scream when I heard him say it for the first time in 5 years that the science creating ESS 60 in his lab is very similar to the basic science creating crop circles,
Yeah.
free energy, spaceships, ESS 60, who knew? Now
Yeah.
I do. Very exciting. So wait till you hear his description, and then I want you to take us to the moon with spinning plasma vortices,
Oh,
because this is fascinating.
okay. So
All
Chris,
right.
do you have
Yeah, go ahead.
you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I'll share my screen. Patty, what do you think I kind of do? Because there's a lot more to talk about after the production. Maybe we pause at the production for you guys to comment on how it's actually produced. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
All right. So what we're looking at here is just a really rudimentary mock-up of a production machine, so a fullerene production machine. What are we talking about? This molecule that I'm holding is the most abundant fullerene. It's the most common of this collection of molecules called fullerenes. This one was discovered in 1985 at Rice University here in Houston. That's where our lab is based. The three scientists who discovered it actually won the Nobel Prize for the discovery. Our lab started producing it, and so we're the oldest and longest manufacturers and distributors of this molecule on the planet. We've been manufacturing and distributing it since 1991, a full 5 years before they won the Nobel Prize. So we're kind of old school. How do you make this? And before we talk about how you make it, I want to point out this is a naturally occurring molecule. Whether you've taken our supplement or not, you have been exposed to this molecule. And I offer as evidence that if you collect the soot from a candle flame, and you normally would do that by putting a cold steel plate over a candle flame, and you would collect this deep dark soot. That deep dark soot has parts per million or parts per billion of this ESS60 molecule. So we've all been exposed to it. It's a very natural molecule. Now, parts per billion, parts per million is not enough quantity to utilize in a health supplement. And so we actually have to make it in a reactor. And just to point out, there is no difference between the ESS60 molecule that you might collect in the soot of a candle or out of this reactor, or there's also tons of it in space. You do come across it from really kind of any place where carbon is getting vaporized to its kind of fundamental pairs.
mm,
Now, in this chamber, this is a fullerene soot production chamber. You can see that you've got two graphite rods and they are moving towards each other. And between those, you actually have an arc so that you can vaporize these graphite rods. Now, it turns out that graphite is one of the hardest materials on the planet to vaporize. It takes local temperatures of the sun to vaporize graphite rods. So you can kind of imagine here between these two rods, this beautiful arc, this beautiful plasma that is vaporizing these rods. It turns out that if you just stick these rods together and you run this arc plasma, they'll start to wear at an angle, right?
oh,
Then what that does is make sure that that plasma, that vaporizing graphite doesn't happen in the middle of the chamber. You can imagine, and I'll kind of digress here for a second. You've got the temperature of the sun here between these two graphite rods. That is exactly why we have this water cooling, right? This water cooling goes around the entire chamber. There's separate water cooling paths to go into the arms through which on the very ends, you've got copper, and then you've got graphite towards the middle, and it's being vaporized. So you have to manage all of this temperature. So if you start getting this skewed graphite rod shape, then it's starting to move the reaction from the center of the chamber elsewhere. If you rotate these rods in the same direction, you get that same skewing. In order to make these rods rotate, in order to make these rods continue to have these parallel surfaces in the middle of the chamber, you actually have to rotate them in opposite directions,
yeah.
right? So you've got this plasma, you've got these opposite rotating graphite rods, and out of that comes soot. Patty, wave your hands if you want to jump in. But I can keep talking about the soot, and it kind of takes us down a path that's not related to kind of what you're excited about.
Well, Penny, what do you think about the counter-rotating spinning plasma?
I would think that that would have to be a necessity. Otherwise, because even though an arc looks like it's going in a direction, it's also spiraling within itself. And so whatever part of the rod gets hit first in that spiral motion is going to wear off the first. And so by going in opposite directions, you get a more even kind of wear and tear. So, yeah.
I wanted to ask you also, because I think you're the one that taught me this, that when you take a plasma field and you spin it in a clockwise
Yes.
motion with
Right.
intention, you can create matter. But if you
Um,
spin it, is it
you
the opposite?
No, it's both. It's both. But one, if you spin in the other direction, you get something called antimatter. So it's just matter, but it doesn't have the same spin. And so we say, well, that'll destroy us. There's all kinds of, and when you do bring two fields together, they're either going to have constructive or destructive interference. So you want constructive.
Right. And that's why Chris was saying, with one direction it was going kind of askew, and
Uh-huh.
then spinning it the other direction, it went askew the other way. But
Right.
then counter rotating, you had the perfect
They
rhythm
balance. Yeah.
balance.
Yeah.
Um, so I thought that when you spin plasma in a negative field, in a negative direction with intention, you can destroy matter, such as directed energy weapons.
Well, you can certainly interfere. First of all, I think it's important. It sounds very simple when Chris is doing a great job of explaining, but in everyday living, if you get a spinning plasma, there's all sorts of other stuff that's moving with it, electric fields and charges of all sorts and temperature gradients and all of that all comes together and it either rolls with the spinning or it gets in the way. And it's when it gets in the way, that's when patterns are created. And those patterns are what create crop circles, to use that as an example. Or if it's a human, you get the pattern that creates the template for a humanoid being, or an animal, or a broccoli plant, or a sunflower, or whatever it is. And plasma is just amazing. Well, some people say it's the fourth state of matter, but it's pre-matter, and it holds the pattern that's going to collect the particles that become, the physical stuff. So, yeah. So go ahead, Chris. Keep going.
All right, let me get that screen share. But I was kind of mesmerized by that conversation. All right,
Okay.
so here we are. We're vaporizing these graphite rods, these counter-rotating graphite rods at the temperature of the sun. There's a couple other things that make the production of these fullerenes really challenging. One of them is if there's any oxygen present, it will not produce any fullerenes. So you actually will notice here we've got a vacuum pump. The process is you vacuum out all of the air, including the oxygen, and then you backfill it with a helium gas. And then you actually vacuum it again to get any of the residual oxygen that might have been in there. And then you again fill it up with helium. But instead of bringing it all the way to atmospheric pressure, you run this reaction at a slight vacuum. That's how you create the highest concentration of the fullerenes. That's how you manufacture more of the fullerenes. Little thing to note, you've got this window here. You can actually watch this reaction occur. If you don't have welder's goggles over that window, you will burn out your retina. And if you let that light shine on your skin, you will get a sunburn because it is, in fact, the temperature of the sun. So you might already get an impression this stuff might be expensive because we're already dealing with the temperatures of the sun. And let me throw a little wrinkle in that. What you produce is a soot. Now, I'm going to use an example. If you had a small pile of that soot in your hand, it's very similar to if you had a pile of ink toner or copier toner, where if you drop it, almost none of it would hit the ground because it's so light and fluffy. It's just a disaster to work with. That also makes it more expensive. On top of that soot that you dropped and it didn't hit the ground, 90% of it is garbage, amorphous carbon garbage that's useless. Only 10% of it is fullerenes, and that actually includes other fullerenes. We'll talk about that here in a second.
Hmm.
So our first step is, how do we separate that amorphous carbon garbage
That
from
was my
the
next question.
yeah, from the fullerenes. And the best way, there's a really good analogy. If you had a pile of sugar and sand together, the way you would separate that is you would pour water in it, right? That sugar would dissolve in the water, then you would filter it. The sand would stay on top of the filter because it's not dissolved in the water. The sugar would go through the filter because it's dissolved in the water. You would boil off that water and you'd have your sugar crystals with no sand. Same thing here. So we use a solvent, we filter it, and that 90% of amorphous carbon garbage stays on top of the filter, and the fullerenes go through in solution. Then we boil off that solution, and we have our crystalline fullerenic powder. This is an example right here of extracted fullerene soot. So this is really what we would call fullerene extract. You can see this isn't light and fluffy. That's because it's already been extracted. This is pure fullerenes with none of that amorphous carbon garbage. Now, we just keep different layers of expense on how to manufacture this. So next step is that fullerenic extract is comprised of a gambit of molecules, carbon 60, carbon 70, 74, 76, 78, all sorts of higher fullerenes. The most abundant is the carbon 60, this beautiful molecule, and after we process it for people and pets, we call it ESS 60. About 80% of this powder here is that carbon 60 molecule. So the next step is to separate it. And I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit. Let's talk about how we know what the concentration of carbon 60 versus carbon 70, et cetera, is in this extracted soot. The way we do that, I'm going to have to skip ahead forward here, is with this piece of equipment. This is Robert and I in our chromatography lab. This is a HPLC, high performance liquid chromatography. We use this, you inject a solution of the fullerenes. This column separates those fullerenes from each other because they weigh a slightly different amount at the molecular level.
Okay.
They go through this column at a different rate. And so then you can get a graph that kind of looks like this guy here. This is actually a mass spec, but it kind of looks like that, really kind of like a urinalysis, right? Like, what chemicals do you have in this? And you break it down to how much C60, C70. Again, typically it's about 80% C60. We want to, C70 and the higher fullerenes, at this point, I would not put those in my body. There is zero toxicity data on those molecules. I just have a general rule of thumb. If no one studied the toxicity, I don't want to consume it.
Right.
I don't know if anybody else out there is crazy like me. So we do want to isolate that carbon 60 molecule. You actually use the same technology as this HPLC, this column. Of course, we use a much bigger column. We use an industrial scale column. We run that solution through. The first fraction that comes out is the carbon 60 fraction. We collect it, we boil off the solvent, and now we have this carbon 60 crystals. Now we process that to turn it into ESS 60. That's the way we think about it kind of more generally, is that carbon 60 is for industrial purposes. There's peer-reviewed published research that proves if you process it improperly, it's harmful. ESS 60 is carbon 60 that's been processed for people and pets. So now we have, finally, after all of this, we have our ESS 60 powder. It turns out that the powder is not water soluble, so we actually need to dissolve it in an oil, as an example. So you could take this powder, if it was ESS 60, meaning it was processed for people and pets, you could consume the powder, but because it's not water soluble, almost all of it, 99.9999, you would just excrete out. So it would just go through your intestinal tract, would never get into your system. By dissolving it in olive oil, an oil like olive oil, now the individual ESS 60 molecules are floating around in the oil, and now it's basically infinitely more bioavailable. So that is the right way to take it. And it turns out, just like every process in the manufacturing process, this takes a long time, right? So this is our current GMP facility. That stands for Good Manufacturing Practice. That's what you want to look for in any facility. And you may notice this chamber right here kind of looks like a beer still. And that is because it is a beer still. When we were growing our, increasing our manufacturing, rather than investing in vats that were well beyond the quantity that we needed, we just modified a beer still. You can actually see this attachment here, so we could have a paddle in there and mix it. We found that we had to, by the way, those are also kegs back there. It looks like a really fun party place. The kegs are just a great way to store the oil. And by the way, we don't ever store it for very long, but to get it from one location to the next for the bottling. And because kegs are air sealed, we can have a nitrogen in there instead of oxygen. And so there is no exposure to nitrogen, oxygen while they're in these kegs. So as we were testing this, right? And this is one of the things that's a little disappointing. We tested 22 of the products in the carbon, what I would call industrial carbon 60 health space. And all of them were woefully low in concentration, except for one, and ours. And the reason, I believe, is because they don't have an HPLC on site. So as they're manufacturing, as we're manufacturing, if we wanted to go pull a sample right now, we pull the sample, we walk across the hall, we inject it into our HPLC, and then we have our results. It's basically zero cost because we've already done the investment in the technology, in the column. These columns are very expensive. This HPLC, as you can imagine, is very expensive. We've already made all of those investments, so it doesn't cost us anything. If you were not a lab that hasn't been working with this molecule since 1991, you wouldn't have an HPLC. And if you wanted to test multiple times for your batch, you would shut down your manufacturing process, you grab a sample, you ship it off, you wait a couple of days, then the results come back. So they're not doing that, is what I believe. Like I'm pretty altruistic. I like to think that nobody is gypping their customers on purpose. I just think they should be doing better, right? Because we have this HPLC, we figured out that we needed 3 weeks. Now, why is 3 weeks even interesting? Well, the reason it's interesting is because the original study occurred in an Erlenmeyer flask. This is a great example of an Erlenmeyer flask.
Yeah.
They mixed it for 2 weeks to reach maximum concentration. It should not surprise you that the fluid dynamics in this glass vessel is very different than in all of these vessels.
Yeah.
And because that fluid dynamics is different, there's less exposure to the ESS60 powder, and it takes longer to dissolve. It takes 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks. Now, when you're mixing something and you're mixing at a high velocity, right? So there's this big vortex in these chambers. If the air at the top, there's always going to be some buffer gas. If the air at the top was oxygen or oxygenated, just regular air, that would be folding that oxygen into the olive oil, which you would not want to do.
Oh.
That's why we have these blue tubes. You can actually see it a little bit better here. This blue tube is a nitrogen gas buffer, and you can see a flow meter here. So it's keeping track that we're constantly putting nitrogen gas to make sure that there's no oxygen gas in these chambers. Because if you're going to mix it for 3 weeks and you're folding in whatever gas is, you want to use something like nitrogen that is an inert gas. So it's kind of interesting. When we first moved into this particular room, I had done a calculation. If we were using these smaller beer stills, this entire room would have produced like 10 times more our existing production. And then they started buying these 100-liter vessels, and so we have ample room production capability in our new facility. And yes, we are in Texas, so it's kind of cool to have a Texas flag there. Like I said, that's Robert. He's doing some QA/QC. That's Fabio. He's our director of research. That's that Erlenmeyer flask. This is our lobby. We've got a big old ESS60 molecule hanging right from the ceiling there in our lobby. That was a lot of fun to make. I'm glad I didn't make it. Javier on our team made that. And then, yeah, that's Robert and I in the lab.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And this might be off track a little bit, but you sparked some curiosity. If that's a chromatography machine, what is the difference between that and spectroscopic analysis?
Yeah, so
any
there are definitely some overlaps in spectrometry.
I
I'm
know.
close.
Right.
that you're usually just taking a fixed sample, right? So
Okay.
you might take, you can imagine coming out of this column, you might grab a fraction and then you would take that to a spectrometer,
Right.
right? And
Right.
that spectrometer would give you, so they're usually not real time. The reality is, and I think you're right, that these HPLC, this is a spectrometer that's real time
Oh,
mapping the wavelengths that the fluid is responding to as they go through that spectrometer.
yeah. Yeah. And I would add, for the benefit of the audience out there, that every single particle, every single substance has its own combination of frequencies. If there's only one particle, it might only have one frequency.
Mm,
But if you have a substance, it's going to have a signature. But when you do spectroscopy, or it sounds like chromatography, you
yep,
get an analysis of what's in there, what
yep.
makes up this thing. And I find that to be just fascinating. It's like, oh wow, we can
Yeah.
see what makes up everything that we know of. So
Yeah.
Right. I wanted to elaborate on what Chris said about we tested 22 online companies that were trying to compete with us. And
oh,
they were, what he in the lab said, were woefully low in concentration because they don't have the gear, or they don't put the right amount
don't,
in.
yeah,
But we
or
saw
don't test it.
between,
If you don't test it, if you don't test your final product, then you're kind of guessing.
right, but I think what we saw was the company promoting the most at the time said third party tested. They had 10% on our spectrometer, 10% of what their label said. So it was really low. And their other oils had 30% of what their label said, but third party tested. So my question is, what does that mean? Your cousin's niece or your kid? I mean, third party, that could be anyone.
Right.
So I think that what you teach regularly about intuition is where we need to keep our focus, because it really is going to be what we feel when we see the lab, the
Yeah.
people selling it, the integrity of the information.
Right.
We're the only lab making ESS 60. And Chris also makes industrial, but he will only sell it for tires, batteries, ink,
Yeah.
photocells. That's not for people and pets.
I think
So
I
that's
bought some of that once and I thought I was drinking kerosene or gasoline or something. It was like, blah. Oh my gosh.
we've
It was
we've
bad.
heard that a lot, but again, that's why we call our product ESS 60,
Yeah.
because it's not industrial grade C60. And if people are selling C60, it's probably from China, because we're the only lab still making it that we know of, making ESS 60 for sure. But
Really.
pretty much everybody's kind of faded away. That was, we saw people selling supercharged, and it was charcoal. It had no C60 in our HPLC machine.
Oh my.
We saw nano onions. We have seen C60 mixed with water. And Chris said twice, it's not water soluble.
Oh,
So,
I have a question about that. Can I interrupt you?
yes,
Yeah.
Chris, when you were taking that soot and you said we put it in water and the soot stays on top of the filter and the C60 dissolves in the water and then you can, I don't know, do something to access it. Okay. So why doesn't it dissolve in water after you've separated it from the soot? And why does it have
Yeah.
to have oil?
So that was just an example of how you would separate sugar and sand, right?
Okay.
That's an
Yeah.
analogy. The solvent is not water when you're
Oh,
separating
it's a
amorphous
solvent.
carbon from the raw carbon 60, the industrial
Gotcha.
carbon 60 molecule.
Okay. All right. That answers that question. And the fact that it's oil soluble, all of the main nutrients in the body, vitamin A, vitamin D, E, K, those are all oil soluble. They
Yep.
do the major falling of healing that goes on in the body. You can't heal without those. And you will go down without those. And you won't be able to recover and you'll do all this other stuff. Yeah, you got to have the oil. And when it's laced with C60 ES, wait, I'm saying that wrong.
ESS 60.
ESS 60, then you get this added benefit, which is
Mm.
tremendous. somebody just said, wrote to me and said, this is all what I'm doing. And they had C60 was listed in there in parentheses. They said, wow, what a difference. And I thought, oh, yeah, it does. Makes a huge difference. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm sorry I interrupted the whole
No,
process.
no, no. This is a conversation and we all add something. But for
Yeah,
me, bringing all these UFO sciences to realize basic science is kind of common of
wow,
spinning plasma counter rotating positions with
right.
intention. We're going to be able to create all kinds of wonderful things.
Why do you think there's such a connection between the UFO thing and ESS 60 and the process for making it? Have
It,
you ever asked yourself that?
yeah, it's the spinning plasma fields plus intention.
It's a science. They have advanced science. They
Yes.
live so much longer than we do. We're dying when we're still babies. And they are, they have, not only do they have the science that, Chris, you probably think it's just ordinary everyday stuff. But, when I go out there in the world and talk with people, they're I don't want to say they're back in the dark ages, but they're still focused on what I call ninth grade science from 1959. It doesn't really, it isn't, we've gone so far beyond that science that it grieves me to think that people don't know and therefore they can't get on board. And if you want to evolve to become an advanced human being or superhuman, you have to live long enough to be able to learn the tricks of the trade, so to speak. And ESF 60 is one of the ways of doing that and avoiding keeping your medical bills. You avoid medical bills really to a huge degree. And I often tell people I don't have insurance. I don't buy insurance. I don't need insurance. I am my insurance. If I fall down on the job, I'll get sick or I'll get hurt. But, if you pay attention and you try to be healthy, you'll avoid a huge amount of debt that just goes into a black hole. And ESF 60 is part of what I'm going to call the energy of avoiding those black holes of debt. So, yeah. So,
Absolutely. And on a physical level, again, it's simple science, which is we are made of cells. All of our cells have mitochondria, the powerhouse of every cell.
yeah,
Most of the body has 50 to 5,000 mitochondria per cell, except blood has none. But the brain has 2 million.
right.
So
Yeah.
what a difference when I just took a shot because I've got 3 shows in a row, starting with you
Oh,
today. And you guys
okay.
didn't do a shot, but I had to steal one because I noticed the difference within 5 minutes. My brain is just quicker, sharper. Not that I need to be on point more than I feel, I put it in my morning coffee. So I'm cooking starting at 8. I just go all day until I crash at 9. But in my opinion, I have really backed off on so many things I used to spend money on: supplements, vitamins, minerals. I run my pendulum every week, the boxes of stuff. But the Evo always is a yes. It's the easiest thing. You take it on a spoon before noon, and it's like go power all day. Or shoot it out of the bottle, or in Chris's case, he's in a lab, so he uses a beaker. Every once in a while, people are like, yeah, what's with the lab coat? Look at the actor. It's like, no, he's actually in the lab, and
Yeah.
that's a lab coat. And after the show's over, he's going back to work, and some people think, oh, it's expensive. But when you realize the quality of the lab, the fact that we're the only one making the clean ESS 60 in the world, it's worth it if you care about your mitochondria, your energy, your longevity, your mental focus. And that to me is the main thing because Penny, you and we live on our intuition. I watch a lot of news, but it's also about me reading the energy of the person making those claims. Is it true?
Yeah, and between the lines. And what comes to you when you are watching, reading, listening? And you can't have that intuitive function working at peak capacity when you're not healthy, because your own consciousness is going to interrupt and say, you need to change this, you need to do that, you need to start this, you need to stop that. And it won't let up until you do. And that is just, people don't realize their body is talking to them. So, and Chris, do you have some more slides you want to share? Because what you've shared is really interesting.
Yeah, I've got one. Let me get that pulled up and we can talk about this real quick. I think this is the impact on mitochondria.
Oh,
Um, Right. So this is the BOSS theory, buffering oxidative stress system.
okay.
Again, Patty mentioned mitochondria powerhouse of every cell. There is actually a negative byproduct with mitochondria when it's producing energy for your cells, and that negative byproduct is reactive oxygen species. I like to picture these like little bumper cars, like everything, if they're left to their own devices, everything they slam into, they're causing rust, oxidative stress, oxidative damage, ultimately inflammaging.
Yeah.
And internal to the mitochondria, you actually have melatonin and glutathione to manage those reactive oxygen species. Now, I like to pause here. Melatonin is the sleep hormone. Remember, our most consistent testimonial is people take the product in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. Melatonin is the sleep hormone, so there's a lot of good parallels here. Now, what happens when you stress a mitochondria? And I kind of like to point out, how do you stress a mitochondria? You are alive in modern society. You have stressed mitochondria. In
Yes.
that case, your mitochondria starts producing more reactive oxygen species than can be managed by the internal glutathione and melatonin. And that's when you can even see they can get out of the mitochondria. That's when they start running around like little bumper cars. And that's where this ESS60 molecule comes into play. We know from peer-reviewed published research that this molecule can hold up to 6 negatively charged particles on the exterior of the cage. We also know that it is from peer-reviewed published research that it gets into the mitochondria. So here we have a picture of it, unlike the stressed mitochondria where you've got the reactive oxygen species running around and doing damage, here the ESS60 molecule is holding on to those reactive oxygen species so they can't do any damage. And then when that particular mitochondria is able to replenish the melatonin or the glutathione, then they can go and manage those reactive oxygen species appropriately. And that's why we say the ESS60 molecule is the BOSS, a buffering oxidative stress system. And the summary is, we believe we're reducing the negative impact of stressed mitochondria. And if you reduce the negative impact of stressed mitochondria, you should have systemic benefits. You should have what we have, which are head-to-toe testimonials.
Yeah. There you go. When you look at the mitochondria inside a cell, it looks like plates stacked up. It reminds me actually of the way the brain matter is constructed, the white matter in the brain, that stuff that looks like it's all wrinkled up in there. And it is all wrinkled up. It's about the size of a pillowcase. If you were to take your white matter out and shake it, it would be about the size and thickness of a pillowcase. And in that there are 8 to 10 or more layers. I'm not sure how many. I think there's at least 8, and they're all held apart by these little columns. And I always envision C60 getting into the brain, getting into those areas, getting into the plates of the mitochondria in the cell, which are similar to brain construction. In fact, I think the mitochondria is the brain of the cell. And that whole thing, when you kind of just slide some ESS60 through those plates, it's like a vacuum cleaner when I watch that operation at the clairvoyant level, and it just picks up all kinds of stuff and just sweeps it right on through. It's like, oh my, wow, look at that. So yeah, it is really quite an amazing molecule. So, and the ability to pick up negatively charged stuff. Wow.
Like a magnet. I
Yeah,
used to call it Roto-Rooter.
there you go. Yeah, there you go. Wow.
Goes through you and clears you out.
Okay. Well, do you have anything else you want to share, Chris or Patty?
Well,
We
I'm sure Patty would like to run through, how people, if they're interested, might want to get it.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
We have a special landing page with a
Okay.
ridiculously great offer. We're taking it just past the holidays till Chris pulls the plug. But we are doing our number one and number two best sellers at a huge discount for first-time customers, especially. But we have the biggest discount we've ever done is 40% if you purchase 6 bottles. So
Okay.
I think we've
40%.
already made the change.
Oh, did you? Okay. Well, that's okay. It'll be back, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So,
Nobody told me. So,
okay.
okay. I apologize. Um,
No, no need to apologize. Life just keeps on moving with or without
Yeah.
us. What the heck?
20% discount is a pretty good
That's
discount on
that
on
is
top of
good.
the coupon code. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Okay, well, we have all kinds of marvelous ways that you can take the ESS60 miracle molecule, but the number one way is through the olive oil. It's not just olive oil because a lot of people say, oh, it's just olive oil. Well, no, it's olive oil blended 3 weeks in this huge chamber that you saw with ESS60 that took forever to burn at the heat of the sun. A very, very interesting molecule that received the Nobel Prize in 1996 for its excellence in almost every application tested. So the olive oil has been the one that we've delivered to almost every peer-reviewed test for the last 34 years. And in 2012, they tested it for toxicity. Not only was it not toxic, but the test subjects lived 90% longer. This product you're looking at right here holds the longest longevity results in history on lab animals at a 90% life extension. Plus, they died without any tumors, which was extremely rare for Wistar rats. So the olive oil comes in 4 ounce, 8 ounce, 16, 32 ounce. I personally love my big bottle, but the 4 ounce is a lot easier to take. So you can buy 2 of them, 3 of them, 6 of them, dozens, and get a nice discount along the way. Plus, you use Penny's code, you're going to get another discount at checkout. So the next top seller is our olive oil plus the advanced facial serum, which is all natural. It's the one I use, and it is 1921 actually organic and vegan ingredients, plus of course the ESS60 molecule in a couple of oils, but the essence is rosemary. So it just smells divine. It's got a base of chia seed oil, and that is only thanks to Brigitte Mars, our lady that helped me formulate the combination. But her skin was ridiculously great. She only does raw foods and she's 70. And she chose this chia seed oil as the base because look at our skin. I mean,
yeah.
Penny and I and Chris are all using this skin formula. And I know that I rode a Harley 50,000 miles. I didn't look like this 10 years ago. Thank you, ESS 60. And again, if you buy 2 or 3 or 6 sets, you're going to get a nice discount. And
Mhm.
then the guys at the lab that kind of waited and waited to approve me doing face formulas, body formulas, lip, hair. We do everything with the ESS 60. And the guys started experimenting at the lab with peptides because, needless to say, great results. And they came up with another fabulous product, which is our C60 Evo Youth Renew Duo with UTH29 peptide. And that is the taller bottle. And then the oil formula is in the shorter bottle, and you freshly activate it in the palm of your hand. This was our best solution, trying not to add emulsifiers or chemicals so that we could blend an oil mixture with a water mixture. You have to do it fresh activation in your palm, and then it goes on beautifully. Great results again with the ESS60. And if you're interested in pet products, body creams, everything else, just go to the bottom of Penny's landing page and you will find a link to the store. You'll also find fabulous testimonials because a lot of people write comments about the incredible experiences that they're having with our molecule, taking it daily, rave reviews for people and pets, skin, skin problems, head to toe, different illnesses we can't say on the air, but boy, are we getting great letters of people having rave reviews because they're having marvelous results, no longer dealing with things that they had for years. And they're saying, how did I not know about this? Well, it's a breakthrough remedy. And all I can say is just don't be fooled by industrial grade C60. You want to only look for ESS 60, which stands for elemental safe spheres with 60 carbon atoms. And the word safe is the most important piece because industrial grade C60 from China is not known to be great for people and pets. ESS 60 is.